first speaker, I will introduce each of them in turn. Our first speaker is Dr. Alan Ryan. Alan is the Executive Director of the Australian Civil Military Centre, and Alan, I'm sure, will explain to us about the activities of the centre of which he directs. He's previously held positions at the Australian Defence College and as a senior advisor to former Minister for Defence, Senator Robert Hill. He's also worked as a consultant, providing consultancy services on strategy, security and crisis management to clients that included Australian government departments, the United States Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Department of Peacekeeping Operations in the United Nations. He's also held academic positions at the Army's Land Warfare Studies Centre, the University of Notre Dame, Australia, the Universities of Melbourne and New England, and also La Trobe University. Dr. Ryan has a PhD from the Centre for International Studies at Cambridge University and also a BA with Honours and LLB from the University of Melbourne. So please join with me in welcoming Dr. Alan Ryan.
Thank you, Jeff. It all seems so long ago. I don't like being reminded of it. It's a particular conceit, I think, of every generation that it considers itself to be the most advanced in all forms of history. And as an historian, it's not necessarily a view that I think is borne out by evidence. But one thing I would say is that from my personal experience, we're at a fairly unique moment in terms of our approach and understanding of the role of women in conflict. And I'll use the phrase conflict rather than war throughout this presentation. And I'm reminded that 15 years ago at a presentation at a conference which I attended, a fairly eminent Australian strategist, when quizzed on the issue of the role of women in conflict, turned around and quoted Nietzsche back at the audience to universal approbation. And some of this, I think, some of you will probably hear this one coming, but he said, you know, whence thou goest to woman, forgets not thy whip. And this was something that was not considered out of place. Fortunately, I was chairing the session. I was able to remind the audience of Bertrand Russell's observation on Nietzsche that most women that he knew would take the whip off him and give him a jolly good thrashing. That being said, 15 years ago, and such a comment like that, I think could go without passing. What I'm going to talk about briefly today, and I'll endeavour to be brief, but a number of key points, is what we're doing in government and together with our international counterparts and with civil society colleagues to develop an appreciation of a number of different aspects of the role of women in conflict. Why is my organisation, the Australian Civil Military Centre, involved? Our responsibility is to support the development of national civil military capabilities to prepare for, respond and react more effectively to conflict and disaster overseas. It's a big mouthful. I've been in the job 3 years and to be honest, it's a bit of a moving feast. And my staff and I will be meeting next week to work out what the next 18 months is going to bring for us. But certainly the issue of Australia's gender agenda has been a very large part of this. And a lot of this has been driven by Australia's implementation of its commitments under UN Security Council Resolution 1325. I'm not going to say that Australia is absolutely perfect in the way that it's responded. Like every other state in the world, its response was dilatory. It took a long time to get into place, and when it did, there was the usual bureaucratic scramble to come up with measures that would meet our international commitments. I'll talk briefly to our National Action Plan. We have a National Action Plan, and it's been a good foundation for the work that's coming. But I would emphasise it really is the foundation for work that's coming. We do a lot of work. We do lessons learned. We do support to multinational and interagency exercises. We work on doctrine development, policy guidelines for government. We do a lot of work on lessons learned, and I'm happy to talk to all of that. But one of the things that we do is that we slide into the cracks between government agencies, and we are effectively the champion of a number of things, issues and themes that aren't necessarily picked up by people who are very busy responding to the demands of government. Anybody who's ever worked in government would know what a scramble it is. When ministers have constant pressure on you, you're subject to the scrutiny of the media. The 24-hour news cycle seems to drive everything. We have a certain amount of, I wouldn't call it leisure, and my staff here certainly wouldn't agree that it was leisure, but we have the mandate to think about larger issues and to engage with civil society groups, the ICRC as an international organisation and other international counterparts, and government agencies on all of these themes. So, amongst other things, we've been tasked to develop guidelines on the protection of civilians, and with a focus, not an exclusive focus, but definitely a focus on women and girls. So we promote dialogue across government. I've got that rather hopeful statement at the bottom of the slide there. Success will mean that we are no longer needed. I think I've got lifetime employment here. For those who are not aware of it, that is Australia's National Action Plan. It's about halfway through implementation. It's been taken very seriously across government, and let's look at what's been involved in that. People often wonder what civil, military, and I always add police to that, means. Civil military police is really that aspect of our focus is on overseas operations, whether in terms of conflict or disaster response or complex emergencies that involve both conflict and physical disaster. The National Action Plan provides a whole of government roadmap effectively to looking at integrating a gender perspective into peace and security efforts, protecting women and girls' human rights, particularly in relation to gender-based violence, but not exclusively. And I think it would be an error to focus on gender-based violence to the exclusion of all else. That being said, we've got White Ribbon Day coming up next week, and you will find across government extraordinary efforts going in at the moment to making Australia, or at least the Australian government, a white ribbon nation, if you like. And the other aspect, which I would highlight and which sometimes gets forgotten in public discourse, is the point of promoting the participation of women in conflict prevention, management and resolution. The degree of participation of women in peace processes remains absolutely disgraceful internationally. And we have, we believe, a particular role in promoting the participation of women. And certainly if we look at the peace operations that Australia has participated in our own region, we have a mixed record. We could do better, but at least it is something that is on our agenda. And I believe as we look forward to future security building within the region, this is going to assume a greater priority. Gender issues are increasingly important to all of us across government. So what exactly are we doing? We're developing awareness in terms of education and training across government. We do that by dint of programs through the National Security College, the Australian Defence College, but don't forget all of the induction training that is done for the many police, public servants and military people, not only for Australians, but for the international counterparts with whom we engage on a regular basis. This is big business for government, and it's about building culture. There's a very important element of building understanding across government. As I said, 15 years ago, you could hear a fairly brutish 19th century realist comment like that go without comment in a public conference. Nowadays, it would be howled down with howls of derision. We find that government policy is increasingly driven and informed by gender analysis, which allows people on operations to develop a more comprehensive and nuanced picture of the environment. I'll talk briefly to that in a second. Certainly in the context of the operations in which we find ourselves, or have found ourselves, from Afghanistan through to the Solomons and Timor and Bougainville, there is a big issue about the different nature of the security that needs to be provided, often at village level, to different groups within the community. But at the end of the day, the objective is to ensure that women have and achieve equal partnership with men in the peace process. I won't go through this in any detail. You can read it yourself. just gives you an idea of the breadth of the work that we're involved in. We're a small centre. I've only got 24 people, but we do actually have a far larger network of people working with us and often for us. So there's quite a lot of work that informs us. A few things that I would highlight there, and we have a very good website, and I encourage you to go and have a look at the Civil Military Centre's website, are our publications: Sexual Violence in Conflict and Post-Conflict Settings, a primer, Gendered Crises, Gendered Responses, the Necessity and Utility of Gender Perspectives in Conflicts and Disasters. These have been adopted by military and police and public sector leadership in Australia as fundamental texts that are being used to inform the way that we do business. We're developing training packages. We've created 2 documentaries, Mandated to Protect and Side by Side. I haven't brought copies of those with me because they're on YouTube, and if you look them up, they're high quality, half-hour documentaries introduced on both occasions by Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and with a range of people speaking from personal experience as the subjects of the lack of protection and insecurity right through to senior operational staff. And again, they're easy to watch, they're very accessible, and I believe they're very informative, so I'd encourage people to have a look at them. I'd mentioned the research project that we're trying to get off the ground at the moment, Deployed Women, Australian Civilian Police and Military Personnel in Multilateral Peace and Security Operations. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's proving to be a difficult piece of work to get off the ground, and Judy Swan, who's sitting down the back at the moment, is responsible for getting it up and running. And it's proving difficult because it's a topic that keeps growing as we try to build a concept of it. But it is major business for us in government, and I think it's going to be an excellent product at the end of the day. I have brought with myself a couple of copies of the publication Gendered Crises, Gendered Responses, the necessity and utility of a gender perspective in conflicts and disasters. It's a good example of what we do. I don't want to take any back with me to Canberra, so please take them off my hands. If you want more copies, we can provide them to you. And again, they're certainly available on the internet. I highlight that one because it's a plain English guide to people who will find themselves deployed into operations, whether they are military, police, NGOs, international organisations, and it will inform them as to why it is important in terms of planning and reaction to operational circumstances to develop and apply a gender lens to everything that they do. One day this will be normalised. 10 years ago we didn't even think about it. So we're at a very interesting stage, I think, in the development of the way that we think about the way that we respond on operations. I spoke about Side by Side, the video in terms of women, peace and security. It's a very effective teaching tool. It's been translated into innumerable languages, not by us, but by other countries. They simply took it and asked if they could translate it. And together with another documentary, Mandated to Protect, it's been a very effective educational tool internationally. The important thing about this, as with most of our products, and it reflects this morning's presentation, is it's not something that we've done ourselves or dreamed up by ourselves. It is the collaboration of a whole range of major players, both from within government and outside government. So forums such as the one as we're at today are incredibly important at getting the message out, but also at building a constituency of understanding. And I found it fascinating that in an ICRC conference to hear the phrase collaboration, or the word collaboration used, because I've spent years trying to expunge that word from my vocabulary, and now it's back. But it's absolutely fantastic to hear the consideration of what this means in the real world. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Alan. Dr. Nuria Salehi is the Executive Director of the Afghan-Australian Development Association. A passionate advocate for women's rights and provision of education in Afghanistan, Dr. Salehi spent many years privately assisting Afghanis to settle in Australia and raise funds to help individuals and families in Afghanistan before formally establishing the Afghan-Australian Development Organisation in 2002. The primary purpose of the organisation is to implement projects that assist in the reconstruction and sustainable development of communities within Afghanistan. It also works to support the Afghan community in Australia. Dr. Salehi has been recognised for her services in the award of the Victorian Senior Australian of the Year in 2012, and has also been awarded an Order of Australia medal. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Salehi.
Thank you very much for presenting. Assalamu alaikum. It means peace be upon you. Well, in 2002, after 32 years, I went to Afghanistan to visit my country of birth. When I went, I couldn't recognize the country, especially Kabul. I saw women everywhere on the streets with their children. I saw women in the farms with their children without any shelter. So it was very difficult for me to see them how they were. And I asked often the question, why did you leave your area? They were telling me because the area has been destroyed by the war, because I have no husband. I have nobody to look after me. So I came to the city to ask for protection and shelter, and it didn't exist. So the first year, I raised $29,000 in Australia when I went. I started giving some money, buying blankets, because it was 6 degrees in the temperature in February. And then I said, no, I shouldn't spend the money as I am doing now. Better that I spend it in better way. So I started a course for women, vocational training, for 6 months of basic literacy, and then dressmaking for another 6 months. And it was really effective for women. They started working, and they started doing their own business, small businesses. So, and after, in 2004, I started going to the schools, checking on the students and also the teachers, and I realized that the level of education in Afghanistan was very low. In 2002, when I went to the Ministry of Education, and I asked how many students have been enrolled for the year, they told me 900,000 altogether, and 50,000 women. It means 4.5% were women or girls. So, and if we compare it to today with our outcome in Afghanistan, there are 7.8 million students attending the schools, and 2.8% of the million are women, or 36% are women and girls that they are attending the school. But I'm not telling you that the education is really high, or the level of the teaching are high. Only students, or the girls or the boys, they are happy to attend the school. So how we can change the level of education? This is a question. And I know people, especially girls, that they are going to school for until at the primary school there's no problem, but when they get to the secondary school, they stop going to school. I went in September, I visited a village, and I found out that 9 girls were at the year 9. And this time when I went, there was only 7 left, and 2 left the school. I said, what happened? Why they left the school? I went at their place and I asked, I said, why you're not attending the school? They said, look, in the school, we don't have enough teachers. They don't teach us properly chemistry and physics or maths. And even if we go and at the end of the year, we fail the school, better that we don't attend the school. So it's very difficult to find good teachers in Afghanistan. The Ministry of Education in Afghanistan today, they need 140,000 only science teachers. And how we can provide good science teachers for the schools. So we started the science teacher training in 2007 with a memorandum of understanding signed by the Ministry of Education. And from 2007 until now, we trained approximately 2,593 teachers. And currently we have got another 100. And these teachers that they are teaching in different areas, and especially in the provinces like Herat, Samangan, Saripul, and Uruzgan, Kunar, and also in Kabul and Parwan, the Ministry of Education is really satisfied with our program, and they want us to go ahead and help more science teachers, but we cannot, because we have approximately, we are getting from the philanthropic organization or from the pledge or fundraising around $300,000 per year. And with $300,000, it's really difficult to go around Afghanistan in 34 different villages or provinces and teach each of them. So what we do only the master science teacher training. And with master science teacher training, we are teaching the best teachers, and then we ask them to help others. So, and now I want to start another program to make DVDs from year 7 until year 12 in maths, physics, chemistry, and biology, and distributing it to the schools, and the teachers, they can benefit from the DVDs before teaching. So this is one of our program. I think I went too fast to give you. Well, the second project, and as you see, we've 60 to 65% of the teachers in the large cities like Kandahar, Herat, Kabul, they are women, and 35% are male. And you see women, how they, on your right, this woman doesn't want to show her face. And she's from Ningarad area. So she asked us not to put to display her photo. And our second project is the Life Skill Project. In 2002, I went to Kabul, and from Kabul, I went to a village that everything was destroyed. Women were living under 2 tents, and men under another 2 tents. I asked them if I could start a project for them. Men of the village said, no, it's not possible. You cannot do it. So I went once, twice, and the third time I went with a new idea. I said, what do you think if I give you $1 per head per day? And if you accept, the elderly, they just talked with each other, and they came back to me and they said, okay, because we can buy with $20 per month, at least tea and sugar. So they allowed their wives and sisters and also daughters to attend our classes. It was the beginning of our classes in Afghanistan. So the first one went very well, and then the other villages approached us and asked us if we can organize the same training for the other villages. And still we are doing it. And from 2002 until now, we had 54 villages. We can do much more, but we don't have any financial support. This stops us to go and do more. And our third project is the carpentry. The carpentry project, we started in 2008 because we saw the need for carpenters in Afghanistan, because it's a country that it should be built again. And the carpenters were coming from Pakistan and also Iran. The Afghans, they had no carpenters, so not skilled people. So I started, and until now, we trained 45 carpenters, and now we've got another 9. They finish next year in May. So all of little work, but I think important work, is going on in Afghanistan on your behalf, because the money is going from Australia. And we are taking your name as well, because in Afghanistan, we are not X and Y, we are Afghan Australian. So people, they know us under our proper name. And also we are helping people in the displaced camps or area, like, and not far from Kabul. And these people that you're watching, the photos, they came from Uruzgan. They've been displaced in a refugee camp. And these people, they need really help. I went to visit their school. 86 children were sitting under one tent at 36 degrees, right? Without any book, any pen, any pencil, just one teacher was teaching 36, and they were playing between themselves. Of course, without pen and paper and book, what you do? So we, since then, we are offering stationaries for them, and also I bought 350 solar light in Australia. I took it with me in Afghanistan, and I distributed in the camps for the parents to use it during the night. And we distribute quite often the blankets during the winter. Now the winter starts in Afghanistan, and we should help some of them. So this is another fundraising that I'm doing, especially in Christmas time, getting some money, sending it to Afghanistan. They buy blankets for the displaced people. So what how our money is spent? As you see, we haven't got any expenses in Australia, except we've got a coordinator. And if I go to Afghanistan, I go 2 to 3 times per year, and I pay for my own airfare and my own expenses. And I'm fortunate because my parents left a house in Afghanistan. The house has been used as our learning center, and we are training the science teachers in the house. And plus, we've got the carpentry in the house. So it's a big house, and we are using it for the social life, and also for the community building inside of Afghanistan. And as you see, this 97% of the money goes directly through Westpac Bank and American Express to Afghanistan. We are not sending our money in one go. We ask Kabul, our office, how much money do you need? They say 25,000. We asked them to send the budget. They sent us the budget, and we send the money just 10 days before the end of each month. So they receive the money, and they cannot take it from the bank. Without my authorization, I sent a letter to the bank, and the bank delivers the money to them. So all of this security and safety, because I don't want them to go with my money somewhere else. So this is what okay. What's our objective between 2014 and 2016? Well, as I said, we trained 1,200 women in 54 different villages. Now we should take a second step. We are quite often talking about the elimination of violence against women, right? So how do we do it, right? It's not that we take them to a separate house and keep them for 2 to 3 years and then send them back to their husbands. We should find a better way. The better way is to create small businesses for them. Most of Afghan women are farmers. They're working in the farms. They're not in the cities. So why we don't develop something for them, show them how to dry the fruit, how to pack them, how to sell them. Because Afghanistan has got the wonderful fruit and also vegetables. If we can use that and give them some responsibility, I'm sure that the Afghan women can do it very well. But they need support, they need money, and they need encouragement. Okay, I think I stop here. So if you have any question, you are welcome.
Thank you very much for those inspiring words, Nuria. I'll now introduce our final speaker. Yves Dacour worked as a journalist before joining the ICRC in 1992. Since that time, he has worked in Israel and the occupied territories, in Sudan, Yemen, the Northern Caucasus, and Georgia. He returned to ICRC headquarters in 1997 to take up the post of Deputy Head of the Division for the Promotion of International Humanitarian Law. In 1998, he was appointed Head of the Communication Division and then Director of Communication in 2002, a post that he held until he assumed his present position as Director General of the ICRC in 2010. Yves has, in fact, visited Australia before, and I have had the pleasure of hearing him speak, as I know have a number of the other members of the audience today. And after you've all had the pleasure of hearing him speak, I'm sure that you agree with me that we are indeed fortunate to have him be able to join us as part of this panel. So welcome to Yves Dacour.
Thank you. Do we need a mic? Do you hear me? Mic? Yeah, mic. I have a question for you first. Were you with us in the plenary this morning? Did you see? Did you heard Dawn? That was it. Dawn O'Neill. Was it that the last speaker? I'm just saying that because when she spoke, for me, it really raised a bit some interest element. She talks about complexity. And she in the squadrons, she says complex issues. And complex issues is not about training, it's not about education, it's about collaboration, it's about trail and error. And I really would like to talk, when we talk about women in war, IHL, this is a deeply complex issues. And I would like to share with you, because you are all practitioner, what I would like to share is another perspective. We heard different perspective. Much more focus about one critical issues that we at the ICRC we're struggling with, really, it's sexual violence. And just to give you a bit of a sense of why are we struggling, why is it so difficult to provide the right response, and give you a bit of a sense. And you will see there's still a lot of open questions about that. And I was happy, if I start with that you decided to have a workshop on these issues. I think we need to keep a clear focus when it comes to women in war. We know it's not just about sexual violence, it's much more complex than that, but specifically sexual violence is a critical issue. I think it is a critical issue. And we have to maintain this on the agenda. So I'm very happy that you have that at the agenda. 3 or 4 elements which are important. For me, the issue is not about the law. We have quite an interesting law. You even mentioned Rome Statute. The question would be about how do we implement and make sure there is no impunity. Not a surprise for you. Now, if I give you a perspective from ICRC, it's one perspective. You will have my different perspective. When I listen to my colleagues, when I discuss and when I go to the field, when I'm visiting Middle East, Africa, Asia, what I see is sexual violence as such is a very heavy trends and patterns in a lot of conflict today. And here I really would like to make a case. In 98 in Rome, in the Statute of Rome, it went in a status. Why? Because there was so much shock about Bosnia and Rwanda that nobody could be blind about it, right? People were obliged at the political level to say, yes, we have to do something. But I would say since 98, almost, this issue fade away. Almost fade away. The only place where everybody talk about when they talk about sexual violence is Congo, DRC. This is the place, right? And it's true. It's a terrible place. In terms of numbers, but also in terms of focus, there was a try to do something else. But we have to be very careful. I can tell you, if I'm ICRC, if I'm looking around the world, I can tell you Central African Republic, South Sudan, Colombia, Syria, Iraq, just to name few places, you do have still a widespread of sexual violence. And what is extremely worrying, and it's not a surprise for you, it's not just, I would say, individual cases. It's about tactics of wars. And we hear that again and again. We hear strategically armed groups moving, raping, doing that, putting pressure in front of the people to make sure that people understand what is happening, doing that to destroy community, not only people. We see also that sexual violence more and more is also just not about women, it's also about girls. We see that. We see also, and that's a surprise for us, we see it's also about men. Not just men raping, but men being raped. I'm slightly outside of Women in War, but I think it's interesting when you have to capture that. In detention, for example, in prison, the level of sexual violence against men is incredible. And it's very difficult to capture that. So we all know it's happening. We hear testimony. But what is interesting when you look at ICRC or organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières or other organizations who are really working on these issues, you see us treating few people. So you're just wondering, why are we treating medically, few hundreds, sometimes thousands people, compared to the scale of the problem? And here I would like to share something with you. Sexual violence is a phenomenon which is invisible. Of course, not for the people, for the women or the men who are suffering that, but it's extremely difficult to grasp. And if I may say, as an organization, if you look at ICRC, over the last 20 years, we have found that extremely difficult, and we had to learn how to grasp that, how to understand that. And possibly we didn't. And this is why it's so important to discuss that today. Because we have moved from, in the 90s, starting to raise the issue, really. Awareness, linking that with, in fact, international humanitarian law, starting to discuss what prevention can be, and that has worked well. But when it comes to providing a response, connecting, finding ways, it took us quite a while to be able to, do what we should be able to do. So never forget, invisibility of the phenomenon. And why? It's very clear. One, already in our society here in Australia, or from where I'm coming in Switzerland, when somebody is raped, we know how difficult it is for the victims. We know that the victims feel guilty. We know how painful, or the pressure it is to do that. Imagine in war, in conflict area, there is taboo about sex, there is taboo about sexual violence in a lot of communities. For the victims themselves, it's a very risky to say, I'm victims of sexual violence. You can be stigmatized by your own community. You can have reprisal. You have been part of a community where, in fact, your family could feel themselves that they've been attacked and then take revenge, including against you. We feel that. We feel the difficulties to grasp that. And we know also that to respond to that cannot just be medical. We have to propose something different. So 2 elements for you to have in mind. What we've tried, maybe 3, what we've tried over the last 3 or 4 years was to do 2 things. One, to shift the burden of proof. So when we come in an operation, Syria or Iraq is a good example, we decide that we don't have to have fact, statistic to start a program. And this is the only element where we do like that. We say to our staff, when you are in a situation of violence, situation of war, your assumption should be that there is sexual violence. This is the assumption. Don't come with statistics, that's not the point. Start to think about it, start to look around. So the assumption is really, yes, there is sexual violence. And shift the burden of proof. It's very important as an organization. Second element, we've decided it's not a matter of specialists. So I don't want to have experts on sexual violence who deal with sexual violence only. It needs, of course, you have to have people who understand the problems, and I'll come back on that, but you need to have a response which is a multidisciplinary response. Cannot just be medical. The medical is a very important one, we know that. But it's not enough when it comes to sexual violence. Really not enough. Third point, the entry point, let's say. Third element, you have to, the entry point. It took us quite a while to understand that when it comes to sexual violence, you have to find an entry point, a safe entry point for victims. The safe entry point is the link between the victims and possibly the care. Because victims will not come to the care. You have to allow them to find a way. I'll give you a few examples. In a lot of places, if you look at Congo or Central African Republic, South Sudan, even Colombia or Lebanon right now, if you be victim of sexual violence, if you would go somewhere to be treated, most of the places where you would go, you would find yourself in a room which is not confidential, plenty of people. You would have to say, this is my problem. Found extremely difficult. You'll find a situation where most likely the few health structure are about pregnant or young mother. So what are you doing here? So immediately you are again seen. So the element of a safe, confidential entry point is absolutely strategic. And when you start to have that, then you can see the numbers raising. And again here, safe entry point is not something that ICRC or the Red Cross or Red Crescent or MSF can decide. It's something where you have to adapt depending on the context. Burundi, for example, it's really old, traditional midwife. We're working with them, but they are the contact. They are the one who will find it. In Colombia, we worked very carefully, closely with the Colombian Red Cross and some volunteers. Interesting, not professional, but really being able, knowing the community and being able to make the link. So never forget, entry point is absolutely critical if you want to be able to capture what's going on. The second element, very complementary to the entry point, is an outreach program. You need still to be able to, in fact, communicate and talk to the communities. And let's be also honest, this is a very complex endeavor. As an organization, ICRC, we have found sometimes, some real pushback. I mean, we want, in some, depends on the region, some regions, some places, not far from here, in Papua New Guinea, for example. I think the community wants, in a way, to take care of that, and it will be very difficult to do that against the community. But then it's also complex, because it puts pressure also then on the women. So you have to find a solution, which is then a community-based solution. There are other places where you have to inform the community to make sure it works, and try to make sure that the stigmatization is not against the women, but against the violence, right? And just balance that. So my message to you is, we've moved from awareness, and it's good, it's important to maintain focus and awareness, to know action. But still today we are far from where we should be. We still find it difficult. We still, as an organization, ICRC, and if I look around, find it very difficult to bring support, psychological support, what we do to sexual violence victims. And I think there is something here that we need to learn, possibly try again, be very sensitive in the way we operate. And that was my last message. We need to combine this work in the field with a real, and it's important, diplomatic and international law work. The next international conference of the Red Cross Red Crescent, which will be in December next year, in a year's time, one of the big subjects will be sexual violence. And it's important. And here my expectation is not only awareness, but also that we look with state on best practice. We talked about that. I think state, armed forces, what does that mean? How can we bring that into national legislation? How can we bring zero tolerance? That's absolutely critical at the level of military forces, for example. This is a fundamental one. How can we discuss also with armed groups around that? We have to really improve on that one. So the International Conference of the Red Cross Red Crescent will be very important. And that's my last comment, also agree that, and I know it's difficult, possibly on that issue, on sexual violence, it's difficult to have statistics. It's difficult to capture the intensity. We do have statistics when it comes to sexual violence in a peaceful country. It's much more complicated to have statistics when it comes to war. But the message, it's happening. That's the message. It's happening. We know. It's a large scale. Things have not changed. So we have to adapt ourselves, adapt our response. And that's what is important. And I'm very happy to also be able to discuss that here with you at the Australian Red Cross, because we've worked on that, but also because your government is very supportive, and that's an important element. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yves. And at this point, the first thing I'd like to do is to thank all three speakers for their forbearance in restricting their comments in terms of time in such a way as to allow some interaction and dialogue with the audience. Fortunately, you didn't see me at any point wildly waving around my arms, indicating that any of the speakers had even gone close to exceeding their time, which is always something as chair that you don't want to have to do. So that's my very first task, to record my gratitude to the speakers for that regard. The result of their efforts is that we now have, in fact, almost 40 minutes for questions, comments and dialogue from the floor. So I will now formally open the floor for that purpose. There are microphones which will be delivered to the questioners. I would invite you to state your name and the organisation that you represent, if you don't mind, in asking the question. Harpal, please.
Thank you. I'm Harpal Aluwalia. I'm from the IHL committee in Western Australia. The question actually I've taken up from what you said and what you said just now. That listen, we have plenty of rules, regulations which we can enforce where sexual violence against women is concerned. We have the ICC also mandating that as a crime against humanity. Yet we've seen, even in the recent past, the issues with those girls who were abducted in Africa, and the entire international community pretty much has kept quiet. Yes, there have been individual efforts here and there to raise awareness, but pretty much nothing from the so-called the keepers of the laws and regulations.
Well, I'd invite anybody from the panel to address that issue. Yves, I don't know whether you consider that the issue arising from the abduction of girls in Nigeria is within the ICRC's mandate, but in any case, I'm sure you'll have a comment.
But I'm happy to comment on what things are outside of the mandate of the ICRC. As you start to know me, I'm happy to do that. I cannot only, I completely agree with what you say. I just found that terrible. Can I just give one or two elements? The first one is, there have been, at least to my experience over the last 10 years, there have been specific cases, not large cases, specific cases where rape was punished, especially when it comes to army. And I must say, immediately when justice is done, the impact on behavior, at least in armed group and army, is extremely important, right? I do remember for the US Army, there was serious cases. I'm not saying everything was perfect, but at least justice was done, and I totally agree with you. The impact is immediately, in terms of behavior, that's very strong. Now, what you're saying, at least if you look at two examples, one, the Nigeria example, and possibly the other one, which is the, in fact, Islamic State Iraq example, which is also something extremely difficult. I don't think that right now the international justice is equipped to deal with it, frankly. Let's be honest. I don't think how they will be able to deal with it at that stage. I would be already very happy, to be honest with you, if international justice will be able to deal with a bit more speed on other issues. But I think so far they have the law, but they're not equipped to take the right now decision. I think what we have to push, and that's what we will do at the International Conference of the Red Cross Red Crescent, what we have to push is to make sure that in every single country you have a national legislation which in fact is in favor of prosecuting when you have sexual violence. Because I must confess to you, there is a lot of country where the national legislation is far from prosecuting sexual violence, where the perspectives are totally different. So one thing we have to push, and it will be a complex one, be aware of that. My second point, what we have to be very careful, is to make sure that the questions of women in war and sexual violence specifically is not perceived as just a questions that we, the Red Cross, We, few country, Australia, Norway, you know, the Switzerland, Sweden, they say Scandinavian, European, Australian country push. We have to be very careful. We have to manage to have universality around that. We have to make sure that country, which today are fighting the problems, also feel really responsible for that. And in that sense, there is one good news, for example, which is Colombia. Colombia has gone through a very, very difficult time, and now is moving outside of the conflict, still complicated, but you do have a government who has changed its policy over the last 3 years, takes that much more seriously, start to really look into that, and you can see the impact. Here, I totally agree with you. So it's not just about awareness, as always, it's also about sanction. In this case, we have to push to make it happen. Do you want Alan to comment on?
Perhaps just associated with that, one of the things we struggle with all the time is the extent of the authority, the particular state systems. When we look at protection of civilians within operations, certainly a peacekeeping force that's deployed to carry out operations is within a notion of authority and justice. One of the problems, and we've been talking about war, is that when we extend this to conflict and we start thinking about conflict within states, and then you start thinking about it at the level of the responsibility to protect, then the principal responsibility is upon the state itself. And this is something we're not seeing here, and I think this is, Eve made that very good point there, that there are a community of states that I think have signed up to and are fully aware of their responsibilities in international law, and then there are many states and state-like actors that don't get it at all and in fact have completely different moral standards. And in many ways this is reflecting where we have always been historically. As Eve said, the use of rape in war and conflict has been there since the very beginning. And it's really only in the last 2 decades or so that we're starting to take it seriously. And just in case we think it's something that just happens in the benighted peace operations in Africa and the like, when the Red Army came into Western Europe in 1945, this was a deliberate act of terror used by a modern state against fellow members of the international community. It's not all that long ago. My mother-in-law, who was 17 in Budapest when they arrived, remembers it well. And so it's not an ancient part of our history either.
Thank you. If I could just support the comments made by both Eve and by Alan in emphasising that this whole matter is a state responsibility primarily. It is not an international responsibility. That's made, I mean, there's been a great deal of enthusiasm for the prospects offered by international criminal law arising from the creation of the ICTY in 1992 and the ICTR the following year. But the statute of the International Criminal Court reiterates that the prosecution, the investigation and prosecution and repression of serious international crimes remains a state responsibility, not an international responsibility. And I'd certainly like to put the proposition that the energies of the international community would be far better directed towards encouraging, to the point of insisting that nation states discharge their own responsibilities to deal with these serious international crimes under their own domestic legal systems, rather than create further international systems to perform that task. Other questions? Thank you.
I might just stand up. Kirsty Dixon from Red Cross in Brisbane. We just had the G20 in town, Stop the Traffic. Australia hosted that World Forum, and they put women on the agenda. There was a target around global growth, around women participation in the economy, and as a key factor to improve global growth is to get workplace participation up, and that's from Western industrial right through to emerging economies. And there was a great talk about leadership in that context. So women in war is one thing, and you use the word authority. Has there been an influence and an advocacy program outside of IHL by governments and international federations like the UN, he for she, of how much participation in a leadership context of women in parliaments, in military, and does that make a difference, and is that some advocacy approach that we could take?
Well, I'd certainly just endorse the work done by UN Women, which is a magnificent organisation and which is extremely active in each of the areas in which you speak. We've done quite a lot of collaborative work with them, and I'd use that word, collaborative. They can't do terribly much. Resources are always a struggle for any UN organisation, but they have worked with Australia and a range of other partner states. Unfortunately, they do tend to be the usual suspects, the Scandinavian countries, the United States, Britain, NATO states, and Australia keeps turning up. And that's great. It really is great. The important thing, though, is really to broaden the agenda. I was fortunate to attend the International Association of Peacekeeping Training Centres conference in Jakarta a couple of months back, and that is a very broad-ranging group of states, and it brought in, while in the peacekeeping context, it brought into stark relief the fact that where we've made that journey that I was talking about, perhaps a 15-year journey, we're not that much to pat ourselves on the back about. There are many states and many cultures that have a long way to go in terms of confronting what women's participation means broadly in all the aspects of social life, because at the end of the day we can talk about this until the cows come home, but unless women have equal roles and respect within society, then we're going to continue to face the problem where this becomes an issue of victims and non-victims, and not to minimise the issue of sexual violence at all. It's unacceptable and a major issue, but the flip side to that has to be empowerment.
You had us a long response, right? It's more personal. I just want to give you two elements which is maybe more personal. One thing I think, to my knowledge, there is not really what you said in terms of advocacy campaign really, which would really push this issue more clearly. Now, I link that to the humanitarian sectors. If I start with it, let's start to start with us before just asking everybody to change. Let's start with us. As an organization, ICRC, we have learned one thing. I've learned one thing working in the Middle East. When I started in the Middle East, I received advice from my colleagues. They were much more experienced than me, and they said, it was Yemen. They told me, you cannot have any women in your team. Just be aware. I mean, this is clear. This is Middle East. This is serious. Only men. So I didn't know, So I came with men. And I quickly discovered that as a man, I couldn't access women. So as a man, I could access, of course, all the men. No problem. But I couldn't access women. So I said to the people, yeah, but it's a bit of a problem, no? I mean, if we are in the organization trying to serve people, I think we should be able to, in fact, also access women. That's just a small example. It's interesting. Our own assumption 15 years ago was, in this kind of country, you only have men who are able to deal with stakeholders. This has changed dramatically in my own organization. Having mixed team is absolutely central to our work, including in country where women are not well received. I mean, Afghanistan, for example, you have to have in your own team just women to understand what are the specific needs, being able to approach it. And it's true all over the world. That's critical. So how to manage that and make sure you have that at the working level, but also at the leadership level. In our situation, know that we did quota. Sorry to be. I know some people are totally in disagreement with that, but we did quota. Clearly, in my organization, we have target. We've decided to have target, to have 40% of male or women diversity in every single part of our organization. We do that because it's central. By the way, you are aware of that because not only because of that. My executive team is 50%, and one of the critical persons sitting now on my executive team is Ellen Durham, and I'm very proud to have this mixture. So I don't know if it's perfect for advocacy, but within my organization, it's a clear message. We are better. We perform better. Absolutely no doubt on that one. And our ability to connect has changed dramatically. If you look at just ICRC, we are the Red Cross, International Red Cross. We are 70% of operation are in Muslim country. So you have to grasp that. You have to be there. You have to understand that. And mixity, diversity, is absolutely critical. Now, it's true. If I look at private sectors, just before joining you, I was with a roundtable with 75 CEO. I was the only one non-profit, major global organization, only 3 women out of 75. So there are sectors where, frankly, women have not made it. And I think, to be honest with you, if we want to change the dynamic, I mean, there is no other way than quota. Quota will help. I know it's painful, but then it's obliged people to start to think about succession, what it means, and how it works. So to be a bit frank with you, I don't think an advocacy campaign will change that much. I think putting pressure, obligation, vision will then force private sectors, other organizations to move in the right direction. Even Army, I see that US Army, for example, I know Australia also has decided to integrate women in combat function. It was very difficult to accept that. But they've decided, they start to push in that direction. I know it's complicated, but I think it will also make a different type of relationship, different type of dynamic around that. So that's the response, a personal response. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if there may, in fact, be a follow-up question to the question asked by our colleague from Queensland to Nuria, if I may. Nuria, in the event that in the situation of Afghanistan, if the Taliban is able to re-establish significant influence in Afghanistan, to what extent are you concerned that the excellent and inspirational work done by organisations such as yours and others in furthering the position of women and girls in the society in Afghanistan may be jeopardised?
Well, I am lucky. When we went to Uruzgan, the number of Taliban being in Uruzgan was maybe 40%. In Saripol, 70% of the Saripol province are Taliban. In Kunar, we are not talking because it's at the border with Pakistan, and they receive missile after missiles every day. So I know that women are disadvantaged in Afghanistan. But let's divide women in 2 parts. The one who are living in the cities, they've got a job, they've got an income, and they are nearly equal to their husbands. I saw them in Kabul, in Iraq, and also in Mazar Sharif. But the really vulnerable women that they can't open their mouth are living in the rural area of Afghanistan. These women, they are not allowed to talk about anything with us. So when we go, we don't ask any question. But sometimes when we ask something, they say, please don't say anything because my husband is next door. He's listening to what we are doing and what you're teaching us. So I know that women in Afghanistan, they are really vulnerable. But how we can help them? This is the main question that we should ask. If G20 decided to help women, so they should look after them after their education. Education is something really strong to defend them. And also the vocational training, creating vocational training everywhere that the women can benefit from it. If they become self-efficient and we create jobs for them, so there won't be any problem. And maybe the gap becomes nearly equal. If it's not equal, maybe 40 to 60%. At the moment, Taliban, where they are, they didn't really, they knew that we were organizing classes for science teacher training, and they never stopped us. Maybe I was lucky because I speak the language. I am Afghan Australian, although I go with the name of Australia. Why I did, I went to show them that if Australia sent missiles, beside that, it was the politics. But the humanitarian part is they're helping you in education and also in vocational training.
Thank you, Nuria. Matt.
Matt Killingsworth from the IHL Advisory Committee in Tasmania. Just to take up on your point, Jeff, on the role of the state, the story that Yves Decour told was about where violations take place. There's often either a lack of desire or a lack of capacity for prosecutions to take place with regards to sexual violence. And Yves Decour also spoke about sort of the role of justice as a deterrence. And in your introduction, you spoke about sort of that groundbreaking moment at the tribunals in Rwanda and the Rome Statute as representing sort of as rape as a war crime. And yet, most recently, especially I guess in the case of Thomas Lubanga, where we had the opportunity for there to be a prosecution based on sexual crimes, it didn't happen. So, and despite the good news stories that we've heard from Dr. Ryan and Dr. Salehi, at the risk of being the metaphorical wet blanket, there seems to be some regression with respects to justice as a deterrence with regards to sexual crimes in war. And I was hoping someone might be able to comment on if the international realm or the ICC is not the answer, are there other better sort of answers to this? Or am I incorrect? Has there not been a regression, perhaps?
Okay, thank you. Any volunteers to deal with that? Thank you.
It's a very difficult question. I didn't realize that I was talking to such an expert and distinguished panel. I'm aware that you're all distinguished, but I mean, I'm impressed by the question. So on the regression, I don't know. Frankly, I don't have a special opinion. I can just maybe offer you one thought. What I see is, and it's not just true in war, but it's very true, it's a bit more prominent, it's extremely difficult to have victims being ready then to go and to testify. It's an enormous problem. And what I've seen is even programs to protect victims are failing constantly. And the international justice is not up to the standards. When it comes, to be honest, that's my experience. When it comes to protect victims or people who need to testify, they're not up to the standards. So it's very risky. So you do have a real problems in terms of gathering evidence in front of a court. It's not to excuse the court, but I think that especially when it comes to sexual violence, the experience of all tribunal will tell you that. But when it comes to international criminal court, I mean, you have to do it differently. Here I'm a bit critical, but I think if we want to be able to be serious about that, then we have to change the way the programs of protecting the witness. That would be my options. So it's not a regression; it's just an inability to deal with the problems right now.
It's a very difficult one. Again, I'm not speaking an Australian public servant. I'm speaking, I suppose, more as an historian. I don't think there's a regression because impunity has been entrenched forever. And it's only now that we start to talk about dealing with this issue of impunity. And I was at a forum in New York a year or two ago, and I heard Jose Ramos Horta talking on the issue in response to a question put by the Iraqi ambassador to the United Nations who'd lost his brother in ethnic violence. And they were talking about the issue of reconciliation post-conflict and the things that one would sweep under the rug and walk away from in the interest of the greater good. And it led me to wonder whether in the instance of things like sexual violence, whether there are certain categories of crimes which simply should not be, in a sense, dealt with according to those standards. And to go back to Jose Ramos Horta, he gave the most brilliant and I've got to say incredibly touching exposition on why it was important in terms of reconciliation in East Timor to put the disasters of the past behind them. And at an emotional level, I could hear what he was saying, and at an intellectual level, I couldn't agree. And I still remain utterly torn. But in this particular instance, I think there's a wonderful case for saying no impunity.
Matt, am I right in thinking that in the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC there is a particular unit devoted to looking after the interests of victims, and I wonder if it may be possible for that unit to devote more attention to crimes of sexual violence. Tara, there was a question right up the front here, if we may have the microphone. Thank you very much.
Also, in the Katanga case, there was a lot of witnesses that took the stand for sexual violence, and that still didn't help the case along very much. It was
Are you happy to identify yourself?
Oh, sorry. Hi. I'm Julia Hartelius. I'm with the Melbourne office with international programs. I think my question was more to Dr. Alan Ryan. If you compare it to the Nora Saleh, there was more of a grassroots empowering of women, and as a representative of all Western military operations, is there a cultural consideration to avoid the whole concept of a white male saving the brown woman from the brown man?
Absolutely, and it's a very good point. I think actually the change that I've seen within Western militaries, and I'm speaking as a civilian public servant, so I can't even speak for my own military, much less Western militaries, is an appreciation that this is not a woman's issue. This is an issue for men, and that men's violence and sexual violence is an issue that needs to be resolved by us all working together. So if there has been a turnaround in the cultures of military forces, it has been a recognition that this is an issue, because, dare I say it, in my last job, I ran a higher defence college. I prepared colonels, captains and group captains to be senior military officers, generals, admirals and air commodores and the like. This was not a topic that came up very much at all, and it was certainly not a part of the formal syllabus. And I really regret that, because it should have been. It is now. But that being said, it is just such a recent thing. So, and again, when you turn around and you look at the deployment of military forces on operations now, our focus is not on deploying white males into military operations. If you were to turn around and look at the Australian Defence Force now, we are doing our utmost to introduce a degree of gender balance and to respond to the fact that there are in operations the requirement for women to perform particular roles. Afghanistan being a classic example. In terms of access in village society, you cannot send men in to do that. And it's been something that's been replicated in the South Pacific and in wherever else we find ourselves on operations. So there are a whole range of skill sets currently being generated that see our people, men and women, being trained up so that they can deal with this. I would say we're still at a very early stage, though. It's getting it into the syllabus, and I'm one of the advocates to get it into the training programs of the military, of the police, and of civilians who deploy into operations. We always get pushback, and having run a college myself, I know that someone comes up with a bright idea and says, we'd like you to look at this. You say, well, what am I going to have to take out to put that in? And so it has to be something that goes beyond saying, okay, women's issue, gender, sexual violence are something we're going to slide in and have a couple of lessons in a program that might scatter over 2 weeks, 6 months or a year. It has to be something that permeates the consciousness and the culture, and that's a very difficult thing to do. So I think you identify the issue, but it is a complex generational issue in cultural adjustment. But I would say, and again, I'm a half glass full sort of a person, that we have seen in a very, very few years rapid change in the way that we're thinking. Unfortunately, the incentive for it has been sexist and inappropriate behaviour within our own ranks, within our own society. So, it's all very well to look out to the world, but what's really driven us to having a good hard look at the attitudes that exist within our own culture And one thing I would say about the ADF, the Australian Defence Force, it really is a microcosm of the broader Australian society. And so when we look at them, we're looking at ourselves.
Thank you, Alan. Whoa, I have a forest of hands. I fear that we may be able to take perhaps 2 or 3 more questions.
Once or
Would you be happy to take a number of questions and as a group? Please. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lois from Sydney. I have 2 grandchildren in the Defence Force, and I was appalled that they are not allowed off base now in their uniforms, and I feel myself that I think that they should be in their uniform because I think that they're more... Sorry, why are you making me laugh? I think that they're more prone to be helpful in their uniform than they are individually in civvies. And I was really disappointed, and they are also disappointed that they're not allowed off base now in their uniforms.
All right. There was a question on the other side. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Hi, Anita Peretko. I'm from the IHL Collective in South Australia. I wanted to come back to the Kartanga case for a moment, more from a legal perspective. We were able to convict Kartanga for murder and other war crimes, but not for rape. And I'm wondering whether we will ever be able to convict anybody for rape from the standard, which is so high that case set, where we were able to foresee that people would die but not be raped. Even though the ICC said unequivocally that rapes occurred, that was not seen as foreseeable. So I wonder what your thoughts are on whether that standard can ever be met, having been set so high in sort of the first test case.
And I think there was another question immediately behind Anita. And that we'll have to draw the line there, I am afraid.
Thanks. My name is Tom. I'm from the international program. So I work a lot in the Pacific, where gender-based violence is the percentages are extremely high, up to 80% in some places like Papua New Guinea and Samoa. So my question really is about the definitions of conflict, and at what point does gender-based violence itself become a conflict, and at what stage would that require international assistance from? So it'd be a broader question than just national law or just the role of the national society, but would require broader international assistance from, say, Federation or ICRC.
All right, thank you very much for those questions. Alan, I don't know whether you're happy to try and address Lois's concerns. Do I take it, Lois, that this instance resulted from a directive by senior military authority which was supposedly in the interest of the personal security of the ADF members? Thank you.
And you've answered it. I can't really speak to that one, other than the fact that I am a federal public servant and I work within the Department of Defence, and I've had to take the signs down from my building that identify us as a defence establishment. Well, it is an issue of security. It is about our responsibility to and protection of our people. Is it an overreaction? Well, it's only an overreaction if nothing happens. If something were to occur, we do have a responsibility to our people. So it's not about the uniform. It's not about the pride of our people in the service of their country and the like. It is just to ensure, perhaps to keep a lid a bit on tensions that might arise in the broader community if there are people who, for whatever reason, would want to target the members of the Defence Force. And to be honest, I don't think we're looking at organised international terrorism here. We're looking at the lone wolf, the dangerous sort of loony, and again, that's where our responsibility to our people is.
My granddaughter's the one that feels more vulnerable than the grandson.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say, when you said you had 2 grandchildren in the ADF, and she's in the army. Oh, that's what I like to hear. But yeah, no, certainly from that point of view, it's just an issue of security. So I'll sort of leave that there. The issue of endemic gender-based violence in communities, I think is a very interesting one. I wouldn't perhaps elevate it to the level of civil war, but certainly, as I was saying, I walked away from war. I spoke about conflict because so many of the societies that we deal in, and often societies that have been affected by natural disasters, you'll find superimposed upon them high levels of violence and gender-based violence, and they will become issues. So you might find yourself deploying into a response to a tsunami or an earthquake or something, and finding that the staff, military, police and civilian that are in there, are having to deal with this issue of gender-based violence and to deal with the host nation on those issues. I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did. But one thing I would say, and it's the business we're in, it's education. It's education and education. It's engagement with our regional partners. At the moment, in my own centre, we have an Indonesian officer with us. We have a Vietnamese officer with us. We have had other officials and officers from around the region. We had a Pakistani with us earlier in the year. We work with these people in our education and training programs. We send our people to their programs, and there's a network of reciprocity. We are talking about these things in a way that they were never talked about before. And certainly when I go out on the road to international fora like this and talk to military officers, police officers and public servants, this is now part of the agenda. UN Security Council Resolution 1325, I had not heard of 5 years ago. It now consumes my days and my nights, and that is a really great thing.
Just to, Your Honor, just to add quickly on, first of all, on the question gender-based violence, I would say, to give you one concrete example, it's extremely important to focus when conflict happen, but we have to be very careful to also make the bridge when the conflict finished, or when it go down. To give you one example, Liberia is an interesting example. Now, we talk about Liberia through Ebola, of course, but Liberia, just as you know, there was a very heavy war, a lot of rape, a lot of sexual violence. The war ends up, kind of, right? And interestingly enough, the level of women being raped has not gone down. What has changed is the perpetrator. It's very interesting. You said perpetrator? Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm a French speaking. You can see that. The perpetrator, right? And it's interesting to be very careful. And interestingly enough, in that sense, the perpetrator were younger when it was post-conflict, and much more close to the person raped. Normally, in a normal situation in the US, if you look at sexual violence, 75% of the perpetrators are known by the victims. 75%. Only 25% foreign, right? When you are in war, it's very different, right? It's very different. We don't have exactly, but you would have easily 80% of not being known at all by the community or by the victim itself, right? But then you move in post-conflict situation, and you're back again to a very similar pattern that you have in this country. So I don't know if it helps you to message what it means. You have to keep the focus on gender-based violence, being at war or being in post-conflict area. I understand what you said about law. I'm still of the opinion that, of course, on the international level, and here to respond to your question, I don't know, in fact. I hope you're wrong. I hope your assumption is wrong one, that this standard is so high that it will never be able to change that. I hope we will be able to look into that. I'm looking at you, Phoebe. I don't know. I'll look at this with Ellen and my team to make sure that we have a good understanding. No, it's true, because it's on that case, I absolutely agree with you. That's a kind of failure, right? At least quite a problems. But my sense is it's not there forever. I hope there will be other cases which will, I hope, push the custom differently. I really hope so. But your point is still, my sense is we as a Red Cross and the International Committee of the Red Cross, we have to push to make sure also that at the national level we have legislation. I'm really convinced about that. Whatever, I think we have to push. That would then allow an organization, country to really take care of that. And it needs to be really within the DNA of a country. I'm really convinced about that. And it takes time. It will be a long journey for us, but we have to push for it. Thank you.
I do feel that the time, regrettably, has beaten us. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel very confident in speaking on behalf of all of you in expressing our gratitude for the efforts of our eminent panel. The reason I say that is because the level of interest that was generated by their presentations is obvious from the questions that came from the floor, and I'm truly sorry that we didn't have time to address any others. So can you please join with me in expressing our collective gratitude to Alan Ryan, Nuria Salehi and Yves Dacour, and also make sure you collect a copy of the magazine on your way out. Thanks everybody.